Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or morning, or afternoon, or night, whenever you find it most convenient to listen to the Bonfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with a goal, and that goal is to bring my emotional support shark, his name is Larry, to a fire game. As always, I am joined by my fellow co-hosts, DJ.
I just realized I hate Milwaukee.
All right, and Tim.
Hey, so by the way, he does actually have a real stuffed shark, to the extent that's a real shark, on camera. And as he's moving it around, if you think that I don't have baby shark stuck in my head for unknown reasons, you are completely wrong about that.
God dang it, Tim.
Now you guys have it too. Haha, already great start. We're not even a minute in, and Tim's already made this a whole lot worse. So you guys can thank Tim.
How is this my fault?
Because you're the one
that brought a baby shark.
Yeah.
You're the one that has one.
Yeah, but Larry is not a baby. And I said nothing about said song.
Why does your shark have like a lawyer's name?
It's the first name that came to mind. When I got him, my friends asked him what's his name, and I just said Larry.
Larry the ambulance chasing shark.
He's the normal type trainer in whatever the town is in Pokemon Scarlet. That's all it is.
I mean, look at his smile. You cannot hate Larry. Look at him. Our audience is missing out. Maybe I'll put up.
Where are Larry's skills?
Picture.
Yeah, once again, we're doing such a great job making engaging audio
right
content.
Here. Yeah, no, yeah, we are truly a great fire podcast. All right, speaking of the fire, let's talk about not the fire. So FC Lugano, our sister club, have made it to not the actual Champions League, proper, but have made it to the qualifiers for finishing second, I believe, in the Swiss Super League. So, they're up there. They're up there. So congrats to them. Hopefully, maybe they could make it all the way through qualifiers and make it to the Champions League in whatever weird format they have it for next season. I still don't understand it, honestly.
It's a very simple, easy to understand 27-step process to explain it, Alan.
Okay, I thought you were going to
involving the Swiss system, which they imported from chess, because really chess tournament ranking systems are what you want when you're talking about, footy.
You know what they say in the world of sport: if it ain't broken, throw it against the wall. I guess.
Is that what happened to the fire?
Oh, I don't know.
I also don't know.
I don't think we've got that many walls, to be honest. So that's the other good thing, Lugano is still in action. They are in the Swiss Cup final as well in a couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So, things are looking up for them, which is great. The one way that this could potentially affect the Fire somewhat would be, depending on how far they get, if they make it through qualification and so on. Either way, they would still be in line for some money. Winning the Swiss Cup, I'm sure, has some kind of a prize attached. And that would affect their financial fair play, ability to take on additional roster money, which could potentially mean that they could be a destination for Fire players, because that obviously has implications for the Fire too, because they'd have to use a buyout. But Lugano just can't accept unlimited numbers of players from places, no matter how much money Joe wants to spend, because of financial fair play rules.
Yeah. So
the one thing too, unfortunately, Justin Reynolds, who is on loan at Lugano, has not made an appearance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Play Justin Reynolds movement, which went international, has so far failed to have the desired result. But having said that, he will have like a full off season coming up and a full preseason with Lugano coming up after that. So that would probably be the time that things would change for him if they were going to, because he kind of got thrown in mid-season when he was in out of season form.
Yep.
I think, doesn't he returning at the end of June?
I think that's when there's an option to recall him. Then I think that the loan could be extended.
Interesting. Well, Lugano I think they have one more league game left, and then they do have the Swiss Cup final, both against team called Servette. I don't know. I don't speak French, so I don't know how to say that properly. And they'll be playing that on this Saturday, as well as next Sunday, June 2nd, is when they're playing their Swiss Cup final. So, all the power to them. Good luck. All right. let's also continue not talking about the Fire. And the United States men's national team roster has officially dropped ahead of Copa America, if I'm correct, right?
Yes, the pre-Copa. There's 2 friendlies before Copa America against Brazil and Colombia. So this is the roster for that technically, but it's essentially the Copa America roster. There's one more player on this roster than can fit into the Copa America roster. Obviously, any players that are injured in training or during the 2 friendlies could be replaced in time for Copa. But out of all of them, I don't think that it's really that noteworthy. There's no players with Fire connections really. There are 4 MLS players, including Sean Johnson, who I guess is the one player that has a historical Fire connection. And other MLS players, let me see if I can rattle them off the top of my head.
Miles Robinson, Shaq Moore,
yes,
Timothy Tillman.
Yep. And yeah. So those are the only players that
I say this as I have the roster in front of me because I haven't looked at it at all today.
Oh, good for you.
First time for everything, I guess.
So yeah, like this is essentially now. I mean, I don't think there's really a lot to talk about because we're not really a USMNT podcast, but I don't think there's a ton of surprises in it. Really, I mean, I guess to some extent, maybe Walker Zimmerman not being included may be a point of conversation for some people. It's possible he could make it on as an overager for the Olympic roster instead, which would potentially give him more minutes and it would give him the ability to really be like a real centerpiece of that, just like a veteran presence for the young roster for the Olympics. I don't think anyone really thought that Zach Steffen was going to make an appearance. He did not. I guess there was a question if it would be like someone like Drake Callender from Miami as the third goalie, as we've kind of seen before, but Son Johnson instead. But if you're playing your third goalie in a tournament, something is going wrong. But obviously, you want them there for either providing a veteran presence or just in case of emergency.
Yeah. Well, and once again, all the power to the United States men's national team ahead of Copa America. It's gonna be a fun summer, honestly, with Copa America, with the Euros, and just a lot of footy all around. I'm super excited for that. Warm weather, just a good time out, watching more soccer, international soccer as well. I feel like we don't get a lot of that as of recent, since really the last World Cup. So
you obviously don't primarily watch the USMNT because there has been a tournament like every summer, if not more than one, between the Nations League, the Gold Cup.
I don't know why why the Nations League and Gold Cup have sort of fallen off my radar. I don't know. It might be a school thing, or it might just be me just being completely oblivious to a lot of things.
They very much are not. As much as I love the Gold Cup, it really has lost the value. And I think it's kind of become the B tournament to the Nations League.
Which is partly scheduling, and now we're getting into something we don't really need to talk about. But they overlap more than they were intended to as like a hangover from COVID. And they should overlap less in the future. But yeah, the USMNT specifically, and I don't think other countries have really been doing this, but the US has been using the Gold Cup as being sort of like the time that you play the B team. And the Nations League, because it doesn't really conflict with the European calendar as much, as the time that you play the A team with a lot of players based in Europe.
Yeah. It might be with something I was actually talking about with friends today, sort of how there's almost an oversaturation of tournaments and games. And that's also what leads to a lot of player exhaustion and injuries being more frequent. So
too many games. Yeah. Too many games. And also like Nations League was invented to get rid of pointless friendlies. And now we're like, okay, how much does this tournament really matter? So you're just sort of like moving the problem around.
Alex, Tim, and I actually were talking about this a few months ago. Where it's like there's a point where it's just too much soccer, and we're kind of starting to reach that point.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm like, yeah.
And more than just like a fan perspective too. I mean, there's a hard science to like, even when you're not injured as a player, like you're putting a lot of stress on your body, and like that can mean that injuries become catastrophic, and you get guys like that literally go from being professional athletes to like barely being able to walk by the time that they're in their like mid to late 30s, which is obviously not like soccer's, ultimately kind of entertainment. You don't want someone not being able to walk when they're in their 30s as a result of having like entertained you by kicking a ball around, right? Like that's not something any of us want to see.
Speaking of somebody calling soccer just a game, I think it's a good leeway into the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have one little piece of news, I guess, to sort of highlight and explain, and that is about Omari Glasgow. So he did feature earlier in the week.
We talked about we talked about this already. Where that's his second game. So because he appeared in 2 MLS games, he will not be able to appear in any others unless he's given a first team contract. Which right now the Fire do not have any roster room. So they would need to get someone off a first team deal to move him in.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain that because I think some people were asking when the Columbus team sheet came out why Omari wasn't there. So just a little bit of explanation. But I mean, if you still want to see Omari, there's still the opportunity to watch Fire 2 games, whether it's, I'm pretty sure they're on the season pass or on YouTube sometimes.
Many are on MLS season pass on Apple TV. The remainder are broadcast, quote unquote, or streamed on YouTube or on the MLS Next Pro website, which is just a link to the YouTube stream. So yeah, and of course, if you've got nothing better to do, or even if you do have good things going on, you can go to games that are at SeatGeek for free,
and they're honestly really fun. Just to just go out for an evening or an afternoon of free footy and to watch the likes of Omari Glasgow. And
the quality is good. It's gotten a lot better in MLS Next Pro, I think, over the past couple seasons. The Fire 2 team is specifically like fun to watch. Like they play a fun, engaging brand of football to watch. There's a lot of great young talent on the team. So yeah.
If you've listened to us talk about the Open Cup, then you definitely know that we very much praise what Fire 2 is doing. All right. Now, as you were saying, DJ, the game. Dun dun dun.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I have anything extra to add to the game.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
it was so it just
headline, I guess the Fire lost 3-1 at home. The one goal the Fire got at the end of the match when they were already down by 2 goals was the first time the Fire scored at home since the win over Houston on April 6th. I don't know what else to say about it, really.
Well, I mean, if I remember, some supporters were saying that I think around the 80th minute or something that the Fire have broke like a record of their longest streak without scoring a goal. I can't remember if it was at home. I think it was at home.
It must have been at home because they scored against St. Louis, and the longest streak ever of not scoring was last season. And it was considerably longer than this.
Yeah, so I guess that was the home one, and then Carlos Duran literally broke it, but then more pain ensued, I guess, afterwards. A little more kick to the gonads from Columbus.
Diego Rossi, 30th minute goal. Christian Ramirez, 55th minute goal, followed by Carlos Duran in the 85th minute. It was a header. And then Jason Russell Rowe in the 88th minute just sort of like put the icing on the cake for Columbus and put the game at a for the Fire.
And the best way I can describe this game, I sort of mentioned it earlier when we were talking with our MVP of the podcast, Austin, can be basically described by a tweet put out at halftime by our own Alex Calabrese, who said, once again, the Fire being outplayed on their own turf, 45 minutes away from extending their miserable home run, which, and he said, as of now, Wilfred Nancy's team are in total control despite not being at their best. Like, genuinely, at the beginning of the game, when, even though Columbus seemed to have more possession in general, and just, of course, looked like a team that has won MLS Cup and is in a in a continental final
They've been promoted. They're in the
yeah,
two Bundesliga.
they're in UEFA now.
They're now actually
from UEFA. You have to go to Ohio.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the official Dortmund reserve squad with the logo.
Yeah. Champions of Europe in
insult
Ohio.
Dortmund like
You'll
that.
never sing that. But yeah, no. What I was going to say is that even though they are the better team, they didn't look as dangerous as they have been in like past games. Or like at first, I genuinely thought we had much of a chance until that first goal in what was it, the 35th minute?
Yeah, the 30th minute. So I
30th,
thought the Fire
I
actually.
apologize.
So that's the thing. I get by halftime why Alex tweeted that, but I think in the opening 20-25 minutes, the game was mostly the Fire's. Now, you still saw a lot of the issues the Fire had on display. Like, they had good possession. 3rd minute, Brian Gutierrez makes it down, manages to work a ball close to the goal line, keeps it in, manages to get a cross off from the right side of the box through to the left side of the box. It was a difficult angle shot or cross, but he did a good job of getting into a dangerous area. There were no Fire players that were in the box, and it didn't seem like anyone was really in any hurry to get to the box.
Yeah.
So when you did get good offense, there was something that kept the Fire from being able to really score. And the like Hugo Kuipers had a couple good looks on goal. He had a shot that was blocked from inside the box in the 5th minute. There was I'm trying to think. There were a number of plays early in that game that the Fire had enough of the ball. Like I don't think the plan was to outpossess Columbus because they just love having the ball. And I think that the plan for beating Columbus has to be you don't fall into their possession traps. You don't give them what they want when they've got the ball in advance and let them try to beat you that way. So you let them have the ball, but you try to work against the ball in the right way, not just going for like an all-out like press against them.
Yeah.
So like I'm fine with that part of it, but it just seemed like whenever like the Fire looked like a team that hadn't scored many goals in the past month and a half, and they haven't.
Like you mentioned, definitely one key thing was sort of a counterattack, like not pressing, but rather just getting the ball and then just running forward with it somehow. We saw a lot of that, especially Fabi on Herbers. He was a big part of that kind of play. Guti sort of, as well as Kuipers, was involved in the build-up. The only problem is just that overall finish. Like I think there was like one shot somewhere in the first half, I can't remember, where Hugo was like right outside the box and he tried to curl it with his left foot, but it ended up just bouncing off a player and directly to the Columbus keeper.
Yeah, that happened right before the half, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a number of other shots. I mean, overall, the Fire outshot Columbus. They outshot them. They had more shots on. Oh no, I guess they lost by 1 shot on target. They had 4 shots on target. 5
Am
shots.
I reading this right?
Target.
Did they have a higher expected goal? Like expected goal? Like what?
They did, and so I think that says something. Now, people kind of like scoff at expected goals, and I get why. Like people are like, oh, like it's not really like what happened, but over the course of a season with most teams, it ends up being a good descriptor of what's happening on the pitch. But statistics are never the story. They're a tool that can help you uncover the story and help you tell the story. Since the game against Houston, the Fire, according to statistics from FBref, and there's different expected goals models and like all have slightly different numbers and stuff, but the Fire have underperformed their expected goals by 6.7. That's becoming a extremely high statistical anomaly. And you can say that that's just bad luck. And you can say if they keep on doing like one lesson, and this is something that Frank Klopas talked about earlier in the team sort of like run of poor form, where the team didn't have a result and he'd go into the press conference after and he'd say, if you look at the expected goals, we were the better team on the night. And sometimes I'm a little sympathetic to that argument because sometimes like an individual match, you can be the better team and results don't go your way, but you don't really have to change much because if you played the same game again the next week, you end up with a win. But it's been happening enough for the Fire where I think we have to say it's not just bad luck, right? Like otherwise, this is like you like got in trouble with a witch level bad luck. Like this is like some kind of a curse against you, bad luck. And I don't think that's what's happening. And I think that we all kind of saw why, where you get these individual moments that are happening, like a shot, but normally a shot from close into the box happens when a player has just entered the box or like the defense isn't settled. When the Fire get the shot in the box off, they've been like hanging onto the ball for a few seconds and the defense is there. And so the chance of it getting blocked goes up, the chance of the goalie being in a good place where it goes up. And so even if your shot has an XG value that's like up there, you don't actually end up getting the actual goal, you know? And I mean, part of it is also like, to be honest, Patrick Schultz is a very good young goalkeeper. Like,
yeah, he had a decent amount of saves on him. So
yeah, like there's the XG, but there's also the X goal on target, which is like not just like if the shot goes off, but if the shot goes off and is not going wide. Like the Kutsia shot in the 84th minute that Patrick Schultz saved, like he did like a diving save. That is a 0.97 expected goal on target. Like 97% of the time, if the shot from where Kutsi took it wasn't going up or wide, it lands in the back of the net and it was saved. Right? Like that's, you know, sometimes shots are saved, like, but like that's just Patrick Schultz being a good goalie.
Jeez Louise. All right. And I mean, like you said, problems of that the team keeps, I guess it keeps reemerging within the team is miscommunication. This is something I've been sort of saying since the Wiki era, especially, just a lack of communication. And during the Wiki and maybe the Ezra era, the communication was mainly about going, like, in the way the attack was going forward. This time, a lot of the miscommunications is happening in the back and defense. So
defensive miscues have clearly been, they've really been a problem with the Fire as well. And I think that's not new. I mean, it's been ongoing, but it's certainly been on show here.
Yeah, no, 30th minute, Rossi's played forward. Carlos Terran, Andrew Gutman are running after him. His first shot is saved, honestly, really well by Chris Brady, who dives to it, tries to quickly get onto his feet. It was at that moment where there was a miscommunication between Gutman and Rafa Chihos about who would head the ball. So both of them sort of collided into each other. Rossi had a free ball that was just about to land to his feet and just goes right past Brady into the back of that to make a 1-0 Columbus.
Yeah, and I think that like you brought up Andrew Gutman and like the headers. He certainly has been using his head a lot. I think that him, like not in like a metaphorical sense, and a literally heading the ball sense. And I think that him going for the header there was part of what was going on. I don't think that the goal isn't necessarily entirely his fault either. I mean, it takes two people to make that miscommunication, and it's something that we saw a number of times. It was just this is one of the times that it caught the Fire.
Yeah, and it caught them, and especially after Brady makes a fairly decent save from that point as well. So, yeah, just not a good way, I guess, to, like you mentioned, because like at the beginning of the game and at times there were moments where the Fire had decent chances or like decent possession on the ball where it could look to be, I don't want to say an even game, but like it was something. I remember at one point seeing the Fire had like over like I can't remember, you probably have the stats, but like over 19 crosses. Like this was definitely a very crossy game where like you could see in like the 53rd minute like another Kuiper's chance where it was crossed in. I can't see who it was on the replay, I apologize, but once again it just goes to the Columbus keeper. So
yeah, and that's an issue the Fire have had for a long time. So one crosses as a form of like if you've got possession of the ball and you're going deep into the opposition zone, right? Like a cross is really not a high percentage chance here because you're essentially taking possession and turning it into something that's sort of like a 50-50 chance rather than advancing the ball to yourself or passing the ball to someone in the right position. So you're sort of like taking something that doesn't have to be a roll of the dice and turning it into a roll of the dice. Certainly there's different forms of crosses and like blind crosses are one, but yeah, an issue the Fire have had is even when they get the crosses off, even when they somehow manage to avoid just sailing out or going to an opposition player on the way, there just isn't anyone there at the other end to connect to the cross.
yeah, that's just a problem that the Fire have been having, as mentioned, and as I've mentioned, I think now on several episodes, just keeping the ball just on the ground at this point. I feel like the Fire just play way too much in the air, whether it's heading around the ball or just with crosses. I feel like things need to be more grounded, both mentally and physically, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, even the Fire goal, which came off a header, came when the ball stayed down on the ground until it was kicked up on the air and what looked like it could have almost been a shot. So it wasn't an aerial cross that Carlos Terán connected with, but it was a ball that kind of bounced up that he had the presence of mind to connect with his head.
Yeah. Speaking of crosses and headers, the second Columbus goal, essentially this time it was a case of just leaving people unmarked, and where Columbus player they were able to pass it within the box because of how spread out the Fire defense was. Cross was made to run. I think he didn't know who was behind him, or that in fact Ramirez was behind him, and he just had a clear header into the top of the goal, bounced off the crossbar into the bottom right there, and yeah, just another blunder.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've talked about the goal through talking about the other goals. It's not really anything that was new for what we've seen.
This game, unfortunately, was just basically a case of it's the Fire over the last few years.
Yeah, and the
only thing that didn't happen was them having a lead and losing it.
That's true. Have we done that at all this season?
The Fire have had a lead for 117 minutes this entire season.
Yikes.
For what it's worth. That's, what is that? Like 9-point-something%. I'm trying to do mental math, but it's certainly under 10% of the, I'm trying to do 9.3% of the season they've had a lead.
Everyone give a round of applause to Tim for how good he is at math.
That was actually using a calculator at the end. But thank you.
True. I mean, at least you know how to do that. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
They've only led in 4 games so far this year.
I've only got 3. I'm missing one.
Someone's math's off.
Philadelphia, Montreal, New England, and
I'm not counting stoppage time. I'm not counting the Montreal game because I'm not counting stoppage time because then it's like counting the minutes gets crazy.
Well, no, they were leading though because, technically they were leading though still.
They had a lead in stoppage time, yes.
Technicalities.
But they didn't lead in regulation. So they've only the only time in regulation or regular time that they've led have been against the Union in the opening match for 25 minutes that ended in a draw. Against the Revs for 25 minutes that ended in a draw. Against Houston for most of the match. That was a fun change for everyone.
Yeah.
And that was the most recent time the Fire have had a lead.
The only reason they won that game was because I was back up in Chicago. We'll call it that way.
Call it that way, I guess.
So, I mean, having said that, one complaint that we've had about the Fire for years has been their propensity for blowing leads. And so they certainly have found a way to solve for that.
Yeah.
You can't lose your lead if you never have one.
That's one way of
Exactly.
saying it. There's one way of saying it. So, from there on, there were chances on both sides. Some more fire crosses that, like in where at one point it was cleared off by a defender around the 60th minute. Then there was a fairly good chance for another goal in the 69th minute, but Brady makes very great save with his left leg, sticking out. Nice, very nice save from Guti or
In the
Brady.
69th minute,
Now you're just. I don't want to do this anymore.
Come on, you were about to go past the 69th minute thing without saying that. Like
because I'm mature, says the guy holding an emotional support shirt plushie. All right, and then in the 74th minute, we had a cross forward, just a lob forward from Teran that was making its way to Tom Barlow. He's 1-on-1. He has Koutsias to his left. He tries to poke the ball over Schulte, almost in a similar way to Guti's goal against Houston, but
from a much closer distance.
And it went like several centimeters to the right of the post. So just incredibly unfortunate, just very unfortunate from Tom Barlow, and just it could have. It just shows the form that a lot of our forwards are in currently right now.
Having said that, I do think that Hugo Kuipers had chances that he missed, but you're not going to make all of them. I thought that he had overall a pretty decent game.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, some people were commenting about our forwards. I remember reading a few hours ago, someone made a post saying that the biggest disappointment of the squad right now is Koutsias for not really making much of an impact. A lot of people are, of course, commenting on Barlow and saying things about Kuipers as well. Being a record transfer to score goals, but he's not scoring any goals. I mean, you can only do as much as you can, but I know being in a drought can also impact one's performance.
Yeah, I mean, he did score the previous match, so he kind of kicked himself out of that. But I guess it's a fair criticism in a way. I think that when you look at the player profile of who Kuipers was coming in, like, he wasn't going to be one of those guys that like creates his own service and bangs things in on his own. And obviously, just given his size, like, he wasn't going to be some like giant, like, in the box target where you like lob a ball into the same zip code as him and it gets in the back of the net off his foot. Like, it just like that's not the striker the Fire got. Like, the Fire got a guy, and we saw that with the goal that he had against St. Louis, where like he made something that was really hard to do technically look very simple and got a goal off of it, right? Like, that's the kind of striker they got. But you need to work with that, right? And so far he hasn't really been given enough of the things to work with it. Like, is it a banner game for Kuipers? No, but he did have shots from inside the box. He had some service inside the box that wasn't quite good enough. And I think, but with anything, like no one is ever going to convert 100% of the chances in the box to goals. So they'd be like, oh, he had a couple chances in the box and he didn't get a goal. Like, that's normal. It's a percentage game for anyone, for like the best striker in the history of the world.
Yep. And then finally, around the 80th minute, some of the supporters, I remember mentioning that around the 80th minute, the Fire have broken the record for the longest home goal drought, which a few minutes later was promptly, I guess, broken, or at least stopped. 85th minute, the Fire had a few crosses, a few corners, and then finally in the 84th minute, there was a little bit of ping pong action going around, where the ball finally landed, not even landed, just was floating almost as if in slow motion in front of Carlos Teran, who whipped it across finally into the back of the net. And
I think that, I thought that Georgios Koutsias, who had the assist.
Yes, he was the one. He sort of like lifted the ball right towards Teran. So
And I think that he was trying to get a shot off. Like it looked like he was just sort of like doing a kicking motion to get the ball on target. And it ended up not really working.
It looked like he was doing what Aaron Rodgers does when he throws a ball, which he's like jumps in the air and sort of like kick flips, essentially, like does a little kick with both legs. Sort of the best way I can describe it, audio with words.
Alan, not a Packers fan, in case that was confusing to anyone here.
F the Packers, I'll say that. But yeah, no, first goal, because I couldn't go to a lot of the first few games. I couldn't go to the Montreal game, so I missed that 4-game bonanza, and I couldn't go to the Houston game where we actually won. After that game was actually the first game that I was able to go to. So in the 5...
Ladies and gentlemen, we found the problem.
All right, Tim, you can host the episode now. I don't want to talk anymore.
No, it is not your fault. It's not your fault. That's
what Arai said after when I came back from Italy, and then the Fire immediately lost after being on an undefeated streak, and he's like, "Go back to Italy" and stuff like that. So, geez, thanks for making me feel welcome here, Tim. It's okay. Okay, we're good now. But yeah, no. Since that, so this is the first goal I've actually seen for the Fire, at least, because they just haven't been able to score at home. So,
and you've been to how many games this season?
I'm pretty sure 5, if I counted correctly.
Yep.
Since the Houston win, I've started going to games after that. And I think the only one I've missed was since that was the Charlotte game, which they still didn't score. So I think that's like 4 or 5 games. I can't remember. I don't want to do math. I'm a music major. So yeah, finally the Fire have a goal. In which I remember in the supporters section, we started singing "We're effing back," which was, it definitely put a boost in our step. Some people were saying comeback starts here. Unfortunately, Russell Rowe had different ideas. He just knows how to control the ball, because I feel like even in chances previous where it was saved either by Brady or went wide, he just knows how to put the ball onto his foot, gets in front of Chihos, and just launches it into the top of the mat to make it essentially the end of the ball game. So,
yep. And you described that beautifully. I don't think there's really a lot we need to add to that.
No.
Obviously, being down by a goal still, even without that, in the, with like 5 minutes of regulation time remaining, like the chance of getting a result were not high.
Yeah.
But that just put the match completely out of the, possibility.
Yeah. And even when you hear even when you watch the replay or the highlights right now, you can hear that the moment the referee called game, tremendous boos ringing from Soldier Field. Just no one was happy in that stadium. And no Fire player really wanted to step forward towards the supporter section. Even Frank Klopas was really hesitant. It took a lot of almost like encouragement from the Section 8 groups. Like we were waving over them to come over here, and the moment they did, boos rang out. Klopas out chant started. Some people were applauding, but not where I was. So no one was happy. I think Chris Mueller was the player that came the closest, like somewhere around where the ad boards are behind the goal. So yeah.
Yeah, and afterwards it was it felt, and I think this is the most frustrating thing about all of this, is it feels like you have but almost kind of like the worst night of your life in terms of like a sporting result. And then it feels like you do exactly the same thing a week later. Against midweek against Charlotte, and then on Saturday against St. Louis the week prior, Frank Klopas had press conferences where he, especially against Charlotte at home, he was upset, and it didn't feel like the normal Frank Klopas that I think we've all come to know and listen to. And like the club legend, that part of the reason that he's been a club legend is how much of a booster he is for the club and how much of a believer he is in the club. And it sounded like a sadder person than any Frank Klopas I've come to hear. And then on Saturday, we got the same thing again. It was, the same just sadness, lack of energy, just a man that told us he was searching for answers still.
Yeah.
And that he didn't have the answers.
And that mentality was still very much just off.
Yeah. So he ended the press conference by saying, go ahead.
At this point, it's kind of starting to seem like the Fire is just, you can tell he cares, but it's a question of much longer is he going to go before he's like, I can't do this anymore. And not just with coaching, I mean just with the Fire in general.
Yeah, there's limits to everything, I guess.
So he talked about where he credited his parents with having a strong mentality. And he said, I had the talent as a player, but even then, with that, I worked hard. There's nothing I have more than the mentality. Sorry, that part's a paraphrase. But he said he knows how much everyone cares about the club and that he wished that there could be happier times, but in the end, it's only a game. And with that, I've never seen Frank Klopas do that. He literally just like stood up and left. Press conference.
Oh dear.
So
hearing that, I think it's very likely Klopas knows that he doesn't want to do this anymore.
He didn't, to be fair, really want to do it in the first place. He was talked into it by my understanding of what went on. He was talked into taking the job that he didn't want to take. And I think now the issue is that this was largely, I mean, he's Joe Mansueto's choice as the head coach for the season, which makes it difficult for Georg Heitz to fire him. And so it puts everyone in an awkward position where Georg Heitz can't really fire him because it wasn't really a sporting decision to bring him back. And there isn't an obvious person that does it other than the owner. And I think that it's difficult to talk a person into taking a job and saying you're the guy and then saying that he's not. I think it's a difficult position for Frank because I think that clearly something that he's thought and that he's said a number of times, you can tell that he feels a personal responsibility for these results. Like another team that's had a really bad season is Caleb Porter. And like Caleb Porter will say, I'm not making excuses. And then he will blame, I mean, literally everything. Like it has been red cards as if like, cards are completely random. They come from the soccer gods and it's not, you have players that are pissed off and making bad decisions. Like it's red cards, it's refereeing decisions, it's this, that, and the next thing. It's anything but Caleb Porter that is the problem, according to Caleb Porter. And Frank Klopas hasn't done that. He's, I think, truly accepted responsibility. And I think that if you like listen to the tone of his voice, you can tell that he's accepted responsibility for what's going on because he's clearly feeling burdened by it. But I think that at the same time, he feels a need to just like a sense that I think a lot of us have from the time that, it's like, if you make a mess, you clean it up. And I think that he seems to have a sense of obligation to try to get the team out of the situation they're in.
Yeah. All right. I feel like in the remainder of our time, we can highlight the game that will happen later in the week. We have no midweek game. We have another game on Saturday. This one will be away to District of Columbia United, or DC United for short. And if I remember correctly, this is the only like DC/Washington team that's like called DC because all the other teams are called Washington. If I remember correctly.
Yes.
You were correct until today.
Wait, what?
The branding of the USL Super League team was just announced.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
What impeccable timing. What's the name?
DC Power, which is certainly a name. I don't know.
DC Power.
That just sounds like such a that sounds like a very traditional American soccer name.
I mean,
it sounds like the name of an organization that sends you a bill every month.
DC Power. That's the electric company in DC. DC Power. Oh man, that's
but
funny.
yeah, so they are the second. But yeah, you're correct. Other than that, you would have been correct if we recorded this yesterday.
Oh,
Literally,
my
I think it came
days.
out like 6-7 hours ago from the time of recording.
That's so funny. I love that. Okay. So their previous result was a 1-0 loss in Miami, though it kind of looked like DC were the better team in that game. And it wasn't only until Leo Campagna second half stoppage time winner.
Yeah. They were the better team throughout that match. I mean, it was a Miami team that had Lionel Messi at that and Luis Suarez. Like it was the Miami team that is the Miami team you think it is, and they were playing at home. And they still looked better.
Oh, wow.
But
yeah.
Now, I mean, having said that, it was they are playing. They're one of two teams really at this point that is, along with St. Louis, that is very committed to playing almost like that Red Bull style football. And their head coach, Troy Lesane, who actually was the head coach of the New York Red Bulls last season and came from USL prior to that, has said that that's not the style that the team will always play, but it's kind of like this thing that they're doing now. I'm not sure how much I really believe that. It seems like the way that he wants to play football is a very direct, counterattacking, high press, high energy style football, like New York Red Bull style.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's been working for them. Like it really has. It almost worked against it was a game where Suarez and Messi and Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets were all starting in the lineup. Like this isn't like there weren't injury concerns and stuff like this was the Inter Miami team, and they outplayed them. Like they just outplayed them over the course of the 90 minutes and up until second half stoppage time.
Yep. So, just a few little, I guess, fun facts. Ahead of this DC Fire matchup is DC haven't been able to keep a clean sheet in 8 matches. And we haven't been able to, I guess, win in 7. And I wonder if we can at least keep the scoring, going on, considering we have 2 goals in 3 games. So I guess slightly better. But yeah, no.
2 goals in the past 2 games. So when you think about it that way.
True, I guess. So
no, you're right. Sorry, 2 and 3. I forgot about
we forgot about Charlotte.
I know. I completely blanked on that. That to me seems like a month ago. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I just know it's Charlotte.
I just work here.
Sir, this is a Wendy's. So yeah, and of course they have a player that actually has been scoring fairly decently in MLS, being Benteke. I've been hearing his name a lot. I'm pretty sure he has a few Player of the Match Week awards for his goal scoring prowess. So
he the number of aerials that he's had, it's insane. Like he's leading that category, and it's like he has as many as the next 2 players behind him in the ranks combined.
Wow, Air Benteke, am I right?
That's what they're saying. He's got 11 goals, 12 matches into his season so far. 2 assists, 13 goal contributions, having played 12 matches. Like he's a guy that's on fire. Since coming to the league in 2022, the record, he had, well, the last season was really his first full season. 14 goals. So with 11 goals already, I mean, he's gonna smash that as a personal best.
Yeah. And the overall record is, when it comes to this head-to-head matchup, is 10 wins for DC, 9 for the Fire, 12 draws. So, I mean, hey,
that can't be accurate.
Well, maybe
I think
that
must have been. I don't know what that was from. That must be an old thing, because that can't be. These 2 teams that have been playing each other since 1998, like that.
Maybe more.
Let me look it up really quickly.
Okay, maybe I'm just spreading misinformation.
They have played each other more times than that.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm just spreading misinformation.
Okay. So, actually, this makes it a little bit more interesting. As it stands, there are 22 draws between the two teams.
22.
DC has 27 wins, 22 draws.
Mhm.
DC has 27 wins, the Fire have 28.
Okay, thank you, Foot Mob, for spreading misinformation today.
No, Foot Mob does not have. I don't know what they're pulling that information from, but
Thought Mob only goes back to 2015 or 2014, I think.
Okay, well, I think this will go down as probably my worst episode today. I'm just not on it today. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, and thems of the Fire.
So yeah, I mean, if DC wins, obviously they will. For the first time since the series' early days, be caught up with the Fire, and draw. And if that comes, actually, now Columbus is also within 1 win of tying the Fire up for the all-time series.
Mm. Okay.
Having said that, like as you pointed out, like DC is not a team that is going to not give you chances against them. I think that on their back line there is an ability to work against some of those guys. I think that some of them don't really have the mobility that you necessarily want. Like you can beat them, with athleticism. I think you can beat them on positioning too. Like Troy Lesane, I think is a very good coach in terms of like being a motivator of people, and it's also his first year. And like I think that what we see is like when players or like when coaches come in and bring in these like super high energy pressing systems, it can get results early because it raises the floor very quickly for teams. It certainly works the heck out of players, but players are happy, it's getting results, and then after a while it's sort of like it fades because you can't keep up that intensity forever, and teams figure you out, and frankly it's just a lot of work. And as soon as like that carriage starts turning back into a pumpkin, everyone's like, wait, like the Cinderella moment happens where it like really turns it back into a pumpkin, and then it just loses effectiveness quickly. But like that hasn't happened yet for DC, and it probably won't happen for the rest of the season.
Wow. Cinderella. I haven't seen that one in a long time.
I do feel like it's kind of ironic DC and this Fire are facing each other right now. They are both extremely similar in that DC used to be a good team. They used to be like dominant in the league, and now they're the other team. They're one of those teams that just like is in the league.
Yeah, they were the first real dynasty in MLS, and they became, I think the Fire were the team that DC United fans, I think the Fire's entrance in the league was the first time that DC was like, DC fans were like, this, like, we don't want to play those guys, like those guys scare us. And now it's been, like DC had, I believe they still have the longest postseason appearance drought in MLS after the Fire. Now the Fire have been there longer, so like, and obviously the Fire, just with where everyone is in the standings, are in a worse place to break that than the Fire.
I don't know. With the exception of Columbus, a lot of the old OG teams are just not having fun right now.
I mean, the Galaxy look a lot better this season. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, if we want to be technical about it,
part of it, I think, is just because the new teams all come in and they have the new aura about them, where it's like we have to do things this way, whereas a lot of the old teams are still kind of stuck in the old ways, I guess you could say. Like there's a lot of MLS 2.0 signings going on.
Well, and Columbus have new ownership, right? And so Columbus's ownership have been willing to spend at a level that MLS, like current MLS teams have, and they spent money they spent a transfer fee getting a coach in that was the guy that they wanted as coach, and it's paid them dividends, right? And so we've seen that, like the Galaxy, it's really like they invented MLS 2.0 with like bringing David Beckham here, and they kind of like stayed stuck in MLS 2.0 until Chris Klein was fired almost exactly a year ago. And they've looked great since. Like the issue, and we're facing the Galaxy soon, we'll talk about this, but Pansel's injury for them has, I think, really changed the composition of that team. And he may or may not be ready to face the Fire. But DC, frankly, the organization, you've had players that or coaches and staff that have like left the DC organization and have been pretty quick to express their displeasure with it. So,
Yeah.
but the other, I guess, original, and I thought you were going to go there because this is the, I thought you were going to say like the Houston Dynamo um, as an original team because they're kind of technically the San Jose Earthquakes that moved.
I can't. To me, Houston doesn't count as the original. San Jose is still the continuation of the original. It is
Fair.
the rebirth, but I mean, to be fair, like all that office politics from way back in the day.
Yeah, but Ben Olsen, the former head coach of DC that then moved to Houston, I think a lot of us thought he was like a very so-so at best head coach. Then he goes to Houston and he wins a trophy, and I think that it showed the problems that DC had as an organization. But like the LA Galaxy, they also made changes in the front office that looks like maybe they're getting serious about fixing the culture. And it looks like so far it's been paying dividends, and they look and feel like a different team than I think DC United have felt in the past few seasons, where they weren't necessarily going to be a shield or like they weren't going to be a wooden spoon team, but like you just knew from the beginning of preseason they weren't going to be competing for the shield, like that, like they weren't going to be competing for a trophy at all. And this team doesn't feel like it's going to be competing for a trophy, but it feels like it can beat teams that are, and that's a difference.
Meanwhile, we're just looking to score goals, maybe have fun, question mark.
Yeah, it's still the Fire's worst start in their history. They've never been in a position after 14 matches where they've only had 10 points. They've come close in 2022. They had 11 points. In 2016, they had 11 points, but they've never been at 10. They had a season at 14 point. But it's one of the worst seasons in Fire history in terms of starting. The goal differential is miserable, And I mean, I can't speak for everyone else. It would be more fun to be losing 5-3 than losing 1-0. You know what I mean? Like,
True.
Yeah.
just in terms
So
of
at
like,
least
the
it
way the
means
game
they
feels.
put up a fight, or more so
Yeah.
a fight, or more.
And
of
you're
a
seeing a
fun
bunch
fight.
of goals, right? Like that's like goals are fun. Like we enjoy goals. Like they're even if you're
I think
pissed
they're pretty,
about the team that
yeah, I
scores
think they're
them, you're
pretty
like,
neat.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it says a lot about New England though this year, where it's like the only reason the Fire are not in the wooden spoon right now is because of how bad New England is.
yeah. And New England and like Caleb Porter, like the thing was like he will come in, win you MLS Cup sometime in the first season or two, and by year 3, everyone in that city will hate him. And he just decided to speed run straight to like the everyone in the city hating him thing, and doesn't seem to have been doing the thing that he was brought in to do. Because now there are reports that have since been refuted by at least one of the players that Caleb Porter, that there were arguments between Caleb Porter and several players following their loss on Saturday. So the Fire aren't there, and again, like that's honestly at this point, it seems like Caleb Porter is in the league to make Frank Klopas look a lot better, because whatever the Fire's problems are, we don't hear any reports of that kind of toxicity.
no. All right. Well,
I think for the Fire players, at this point, for Fire players, it's probably just not caring. It's like it's not that they are angry with everything; they just don't care enough anymore.
Yeah, they're getting paid, I guess, and they live
And I
in
think that's a
pretty cool
challenge,
city
and
of
I think
Chicago.
that's an argument about why you would want to make a change, is to give people a feeling of something to play for, even if it's not results, considering that the team is so much closer to spoon than it is the playoffs.
Yep. Well, to end us, I guess, do we want to do a quick score prediction? I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be a 1-1. That we're going to get a goal, but we're still going to have some defensive problems, and that it's going to end up being 1-1.
Tim, would you like to go?
I'm going to say 2-1 DC. I mean, it's in DC. Benteke is a force of nature at the moment. And you've got like Pedro Duque Pietro. I don't know. I'm not saying that right now. I'm not saying anything right now. Theodore Cu Di Pietro. Why am I not able to say that?
That's all right, man.
He
Names
has
are hard.
that guy that has that name.
The hyphen. A hyphen and then a uppercase, then lowercase, and an uppercase was just throwing me off. Theodore Cu Di Pietro, I think, has been a very effective player for DC this season. I mean, they've got matches clicked behind him. Like, there's a lot of good talent in the roster. Jared Stroud, I think, has been playing really well for them in the field. Like, they're kind of humming. And the Fire right now are not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that the Fire win 2-1 off the DC scores 90th minute. Benteke PK, Tom Barlow, and Sheridan Shaqiri score in the stoppage time. And yes, I'm just saying that because of the 2011 game. That's the only reason why. I want a repeat of 2011.
All right.
Nice.
Well, I mean, hey, I guess even across the board, we were in terms of our predictions, very even. So, I apologize if I'm very out of it today. I think the senioritis is just kicking in. I've
you have not been able to completely mispronounce anyone's name on 3 or 4 different tries, and
True.
I just did that. So
I mean, hey, I have problems too.
To be fair, he has a shark on his head.
I do have a shark on my
legitimately,
head.
he's got a shark on top of his head.
I do, and I've had for like the past few minutes. So this is one of the things that people are missing out because our podcast is not in video form. So yeah, I apologize. I literally graduate from university in like less than 3 weeks after 5 years of a double major. So I'm very much feeling it. So I apologize if I'm off my game today. I mean, to be fair, the team is off their game for a longer while. So
Kill me.
Thank you for those lovely words, DJ, right at the very end. Well, as always, I have been Alan the Pull with Goal with Larry the Shark on my head, joined by my lovely, lovely co-hosts, Tim and DJ. As much as it's so painful right now, come on, you men in red.